This very important package, which is meant to boost the decarbonization in the EU, was proposed by the European Commission to the EU legislators. It is also a very important moment because in the meantime, very unfortunate and fundamental, unpredicted circumstances occurred. And I mean the Ukraine war. This has affected also transport operators in a very material way, including, but not limited to, the surge in fuel prices. So having a touch point with EU legislators, but also other stakeholders, important stakeholders, on where we are now is very fundamental. It is also a very important moment because right now we are also ahead of another important legislative proposal of the European Commission, and that is the CO2 standards for heavy-duty vehicles. So here we are today, and before moving further and hearing from our panel members and also from the audience, I would like to remind you, as all of you may already know, that we have to refrain from all discussions today on prices. You are all aware of competition law rules, so I'm not going into details of that. And also some logistics and administrative issues from the very beginning. You can interact, both the online audience and those in the room. You can interact with us, we can interact with the speakers by asking the questions. Those at home in front of your computers by the chat box on the right side of the screen. At any point in time you can ask the questions. Those in the room have two options. Either you can ask the questions by using, you all received this kind of small pages with a code on them. If you scan the code bar, that's very important, both in order to ask the questions in writing, if you so prefer, or to respond to the polling questions. You can also ask the questions and interact with us by raising your hands at the end of the panel. Welcome, Ismail. Yes, here, please. Hello. So now we can proceed, and before moving any further, I would like to proceed with the first polling question, also to ask the impression of the audience, both here present in the room and at home in front of your computers. So the first polling question is: implementing the Green Deal requires commitment and effort from road transport operators as well as their suppliers and customers. Will the Ukraine war and its broader consequences slow down EU decarbonization? The polling question is already open, so you can reply. We are seeing that the percentages are still moving. Oh, that's quite tight. We have at the moment 52% that with a reply, with a positive reply. It's quite equal at the moment, so it's a tight fight.
As expected.
So will the Ukraine war and its broader consequences slow down EU decarbonization? No, yes. Very few with no opinion, though. And almost 50-50 no and yes. I think we can close the polling question and read the final results.
Perfect.
Wow. I swear that we didn't arrange, so it's a genuine answer. So we have 47%, 46, it's still moving. I assume, can you confirm, is it the final? Yeah, that's the final one. So we have 47% yes, 46% no. So really, really tight, a tight fight there between yes or no. Now, We will not reflect immediately on this question. I'm sure it will come back during the conference. Before proceeding with the first panel and presenting the panel members, I would like to invite on the stage Daniel Mess. Daniel is a member of the Frans Timmermans cabinet, actually responsible for transport and for the Green Deal. So Daniel, you can provide us with the opening notes for the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot, dear Raluca, and it's an honor to be back, actually, at the IRU conference, with indeed a very tight vote. It's almost a parliament, Ismail, on 55, but we're still very optimistic, ultimately, about the outcome. Now we're talking about the climate package that we proposed, indeed, 1 year on from our proposal. I would be not from this world if we would not put it into this new context. What you also said, Raluca, earlier, we are truly living in extraordinary times with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I'm very pleased, actually, that the Deputy Minister from Lithuania is here, because for you this is very personal, coming from Lithuania, and far more personal than for people from other countries. So honored that you are here. It's extraordinary. It also has prompted extraordinary decisions. Our European leaders, our heads of state and government, decided a few days ago to do a partial oil ban. That's also an extraordinary decision, and that, to be honest, if we deal with that and implement that in practice, will require extraordinary efforts. Extraordinary efforts where everyone must step to the plate. And that includes also the freight sector and the public transport sector. Now, when I say this, these sectors also need to step to the plate. You should, of course, not be alone in doing this. We need to make sure that when we do this and implement the partial oil ban, with the concerns that it has on the supply of diesel and the availability and the price, for example, we need to make sure that we do this with a plan, a very careful plan. And we are fully aware of the political pressure also on calls to do something about the diesel prices. And that's fully understandable. If I would be a transport operator having one truck on the road, I would also be very worried. But to also have an honest discussion on that, we also must be aware of the limits of only talking about that. Because the reality is, unfortunately, that state coffers are not unlimited. And this situation will, unfortunately, stay with us for quite some time. And we also already see that in certain countries, tax reductions on diesel were actually overtaken again by petrol prices at the pump later on. So you see that you can do it in the beginning and then it's defeated again because of the price development. So the conversation has to be about more when we cut the use of fossil fuels from Russia and reach our climate goals. It has to also be about the slower driving on the roads, that the truckers also do that, where you can generate quite some savings. It requires some thinking about how we can also put goods on, more goods even than we do now, on the rail, clean urban mobility, also starting with that thinking right now. So we need to think about all of that. But overall, our political message at the European Commission and the European Council, so again, the heads of state of government and state have confirmed that, is that no matter how you turn this, in this extraordinary situation, there is no other way than to accelerate the move towards the clean transition in transport. So when we talk about doing something about petrol prices right now, it always must be accompanied with clear moves to accelerate at the same time, so that the pathway that we need is still there. And actually, Spain is showing a bit of the way how we can do this, because in your country there's also been discussions on the diesel prices with a lot of calls for that from the truckers. And at the same time, what Spain is doing is having very, very, very concrete plans and ambitions to be no less than an investment hub for sustainable mobility. So that is, I think, a very good example, and Spain should be lauded for that. Now, it's one thing to say we need a plan for a clean transition, but of course then you need to have a discussion on how do we do that, what do we do, and how do we get there together, as I said. And I think that also three ingredients are key here. We need a robust plan to get cleaner and more affordable trucks and buses on our roads. Infrastructure is now as the alpha and omega. We need very, very ambitious rollout of the necessary infrastructure. We need a common vision across transport sectors, also on ways to boost combined transport and public transport, so combined transport using the road and the rail leg. And lastly, but very importantly, the sector should not be alone in this. We do need to rethink business models across the entire value chain, from, if you talk about freight, from the seaport to actually the customer, especially the freight forwarders, who also need to step up to the plate and help the sector actually to invest in the clean transition by also protecting some of the profit margins, which we all know are extremely, extremely tight. So I'm just going to say a few words like on each of them. On the vehicles, in our Repower EU plan of the 18th of May, we have reopened the debate on longer trucks on our roads. They have more of them running across borders in Europe, together with aerodynamic devices on them. So flaps that actually use wind energy basically to make sure that you cut your fuel use. We've reopened that debate because we think it's important to put that back on the table, that idea, because it can help in generating some savings. Of course, we also still have the plans to move to the zero-emission models, trucks, buses, coaches, what have you. And, well, Raluca didn't mention it yet, but it was on your presentation. You're all aware of the proposal that we did make on emissions trading. So to have a level playing field, basically, in Europe. We saw that electricity that we use in the cars and some of our trucks already and in rail was subject to a carbon price, whereas fossil fuels used in other transport was not. So our proposal was to level that playing field and make sure that we introduce emissions trading and carbon pricing for all transport fuels used in transport. Now, we do see in the Parliament that Parliament might actually move to only do this, the carbon price for commercial transport. And that we see, and again, I can only repeat that was not our proposal. And we will, of course, defend our proposal that we've made. And I'm also very curious to see how the panel sees this, because we must, for instance, have a discussion on what that means for incentives to use private cars over public transport. To just give you an example, we need to have a discussion on that, I think, and on the fairness of this. But it does show, because Parliament might actually move in this direction, and Ismail will know that this has been a very, very difficult discussion in Parliament, and we just also need to respect that is a very difficult discussion. And for me, it shows that the Commission must actually also start upping the ante on some of the other proposals that we will make. And Raluca already mentioned a very important one, a proposal that is actually part of Fit for 55, our climate package, but will be presented later this year. The CO2 performance standards for trucks, likely also buses. That proposal will now be more important than ever, because a carbon price, if you want a carbon price, you also need to have cleaner alternatives that people can actually switch to. And our CO2 performance standards for trucks and buses will be very important for this, because the more cleaner models the truck makers and the bus makers make, the more affordable they become. So we really want to help you as public transport and freight operators to get cleaner models in the amount that you actually need them. So also turning to Iveco, who will sit on the panel, we will ask also a lot from you as a maker with our proposal, because again, everybody needs to step up to the plate. And fortunately, there was already a lovely electric bus standing in front of the building. The market is also, and that is a slight word of comfort here, the market is already moving your way. We see seaports like Rotterdam having massive ambitions for the import of green hydrogen and for the production. And of course, trucks can play a very good role in making good use of that hydrogen. We also see cities making very ambitious plans to electrify their cities, where also again transport can play a role. But again, and then I turn to Ismail, notably. For that, the infrastructure, again, is the alpha and omega. We need really ambitious rollout targets to make that infrastructure happen, because, otherwise it will become very difficult to actually make this switch. We are concerned not so much in Parliament, Ismail, but we are concerned in Council, what is happening there on talks about watering down some of these targets. For example, the hydrogen refueling targets across the key network in Europe. And I can tell you today that not only my boss, Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, but also the Transport Commissioner, Adine Valian, will vigorously fight for example, that target, the hydrogen refueling target, to actually make that happen. Again, I already mentioned combined transport because this conversation about how to do this needs to include a bit more. Yeah, like I'm going to finish quickly, no worries. I think here what we see is that when we make proposals, you often see that one transport sector doesn't like so much initiatives that help another sector, for example, the longer trucks. I think that we need fair competition across transport modes, but we might also need just very constructive approach and a common vision across transport modes how to make this happen. Longer trucks in exchange for a constructive approach to combined transport, for example. And we do hope that people are willing to pull together on this and not tear each other apart over these proposals, but are willing to pull together. And finally, and then I conclude, I do think that I mentioned it already. We do need to think about business models across our value chain. We are aware of the pressure on profit margins of freight companies with freight forwarders who tend to look at the last euro cent when they book their freight. We will also make a proposal to help them to count emissions, to make sustainable choices, so that it becomes transparent what a sustainable choice is, so that hopefully they also move towards making that sustainable choice, and that will become very important for the sector to overcome this. So there's a lot that needs to come together. But again, I can only repeat, we are living in extraordinary times where politicians need to take the responsibility towards businesses, business towards decision makers, and all of us need to take a responsibility for society. If we don't accelerate the clean transition now, if we don't do this, then we are in trouble in building a Europe that is free of fossil fuels from Russia and safe and secure for us, our children, and our future generations. And I look very much forward to what the panel thinks of all of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel. We'll continue with the first panel, the focus of which is the EU ready to roll out alternative fuel infrastructure? And we have on our panel representatives of the industry, we have the manufacturers, we have the fuel and energy suppliers, and we also have the legislators, the European Parliament, and representatives of the Council and governments. But before turning to the panel members, I would like to launch the second panel question, polling question, which is the polling question for this panel. Will a slow rollout of infrastructure for zero-emission vehicles in the EU deter transport operators from investing in zero-emission vehicles? Well, we see there is less of a tide compared to the first polling question, with a yes reply going to 89% and 90%. I think we can even stop the polling question because it's quite clear that it will be 90% or above. So now I would like to turn to the panel members and ask just for a very quick reaction on the outcome of the polling question. And first I would like to ask Agne. Agne is the Honorable Deputy Minister for Transport of Lithuania. Thank you for being today with us. And what is your quick reaction to this outcome?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me into this panel. I'm very honored and happy to be here. And the short answer, well, this is a very complex question. I do not believe that there is a short answer, but from the government perspective, we do believe that we want to expand our infrastructure as much as possible, as fast as possible, but at the same time, we're very much looking forward for the technologies and solutions that the infrastructure would be used properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm turning to the European Parliament, Ismail Ertug. Ismail is a very prominent member of the European Parliament, also a rapporteur, actually, a lead rapporteur on the alternative fuel infrastructure file and Vice President of the S&D group in the European Parliament. A quick reaction, Ismail?
Yes, I think it is predictable. The outcome was predictable for the second question. All the industry, not only this one, all industries, they need predictability, they need to invest, they need to have clarification and clarity by the legislation. And from that angle, I think it was predictable.
And now to, let's say, finish this first introduction with on the political side of the panel, Jaime Alberto Moreno is the Director General of the Land Transport in the Ministry of Transport, Mobility and Urban Agenda in Spain. So, quick reaction.
Yes, no, we share the vision of the majority. No, we think it's really important to give predictability to the transport sector in order to the investments that they have to make to get these new zero emission vehicles. It's true, no, that we don't really know which is the best technology yet, no, so it's not easy to deploy this infrastructure, but we think it's a key element to have this infrastructure deployed. Thank you.
And now Gerrit Marx. Gerrit is the CEO of Iveco Group. You've already seen the nice electric bus here at the entrance, which was brought by Iveco. Just a quick reaction also to the polling question outcome?
Yeah, no surprise at all. I mean, we have been assigned with targets in CO2 as an OEM with 50%, possibly then 50% by 2030. And if the alternative fuel infrastructure isn't there, we're not going to make it, and the equation is pretty simple. If we're not going to make it, we're not going to make it. It means simply we can't sell because customers and fleets can't refuel. And if we can't sell, we miss the targets, and then we have very drastic penalties on us for missing the targets, and then this is the end of story. This is the end of the commercial vehicle industry in Europe. So if there are not penalties on those who are supposed to roll out the alternative fuel infrastructure, penalties, and very, very clear targets, it's a very big imbalance between, forcing us as OEMs, forcing the haulers, and then leaving it to the others to maybe invest a bit in infrastructure. This is a huge discrepancy, and that's why there is not going to be a green deal. There's not going to be a green Europe in transport if there's not penalties and targets and execution on the refueling infrastructure.
I know at least one member of the panel who agrees on your approach. Penalties on member states for non-implementing I'm in the parliament, representative.
Definitely.
And now, last but not least, Thomas Debus. Thomas is the Vice President, Commercial Road Transport Sectors and Decarbonisation at Sjel. So, Thomas?
First of all, thanks for having me. We've been working and developing infrastructures for decades across Europe, Asia and the United States. And the one thing we know, always listen to our customers, it's location, location and location. So I think, as the panel said, it's quite obvious without the location at the right spots, that's absolutely where we need to go to. But if I also build on the point of Daniel Mess, we also see new business models coming up, where especially truck operators with back-to-base models, we see also there we need to think through how we're going to service also them.
I would like to turn back now to Gerrit, and I have a question for you. We see now in this political debate, Parliament and the Council, we see the alternative fuel infrastructure proposal with a more ambitious direction from the Parliament, but it seems that, as Daniel, to use Daniel's words, a bit of a watering down tendency on the Council level. How would this affect your business decisions at Iveco? Would, let's say, a non-ambitious alternative fuel infrastructure discourage you from investing into these kind of vehicles?
No, it doesn't discourage us, but it has a very devastating and very disruptive impact on constructive business decisions in companies that operate in this field. Because we are left in the dark about when to invest, what to invest, to what extent to invest. On the one side, the auto industry, or we as commercial vehicles get bashed for getting CO2 emissions down. Zero emissions carbon neutrality, well to wheel, is very important. The planet thinks in circles, and we need to think well to wheel. If we don't do that, we do the wrong thing. If we just gaze at the tailpipe and think that's the issue, gazing at the tailpipe got us into this mess. We need to think well to wheel end to end, and this is where we need to get to. And I think this is a bit of a push I just give. I mean, we need certainty, we need clarity, And we need to have an equal balance of targets and penalties across the entire value chain. If it's just capturing the private businesses like truck companies and bashing them and forcing them, this is not going to go anywhere. This will only lead to an extinction of certain players, and it's not going to change anything and will not help the planet. It will certainly not bend the climate curve.
Yes. Ismail, in a way, a similar question. You were leading on the alternative fuel infrastructure file at the European Parliament with this very ambitious approach. But how do you see the discussions in the Council? And moreover, how do you see this developing in a constructive way during the negotiations which are expected?
Yes.
Something which will serve the industry.
I'm here now for 13 years, and I just want to reiterate that I'm always saying the biggest problem of the European Union are their member states. Apologies for this.
Can we tweet that?
You can tweet that. No, you can tweet that. All of the people, they follow my politician life here, they know it. Why I'm saying that? Normally, the European Parliament is trying to answer the questions of the future. It's difficult enough to have 706 members, 7 different groups of different cultural backgrounds and political backgrounds. But in the end, and as Mr. Marx already mentioned, we have to deliver as legislators. We have clear targets. 2050, it's clear. I think it goes without saying this is the target. We have to achieve it. The question is how to achieve this, on the way to achieve these targets. And when it comes to that, what has been described already, I think it's also not fair to give all the risks, to put all the risk on the shoulders of the industry, whereas for the responsibility for the deployment are in the hands of the member states. This is the only thing what I try to explain. And by the way, I'm in a really good relationship and close cooperation with the presidencies, always. It's without presidencies, it won't be possible. We had a good cooperation with the Czech presidency, with the French presidency, now also with the Czech presidency. What I want to tell them is we have different member states. I know the standards are different, but in the end, we have to spread out these new technologies and the new kind of fuels, or you know what I mean. And in particular, the different use cases make it so, I wouldn't say difficult, but challenging. But it's not rocket science anymore. We have all the technologies. We know how to implement it. We know the different grid capacities of the member states, and we know now the Commission proposal. I want to thank explicitly to the European Commission for this ambition, a good ambitious paper what they have proposed. But when we look at the reality on the European level, we need first of all a fast ramp up. We cannot afford to go slowly but up. We need a fast ramp up. That's the reason why I propose, and I can tell you, in the shadow meetings, we have a clear position on that. Conservatives, Greens, and so on. The ambition has to be high. We have, for example, when it comes to the fleet-based target on the light-duty vehicle, 1 kilowatt per 1 BEV in the Commission text. We will increase that to 3. Yeah? We'll increase it to 3, and then stepwise bring it down to 2 and then to 1. Then I think with this strategy we will avoid stranded assets in the end, but we will have a fast ramp up. This is the first thing. In order to convince also the member states, and I want to say also 8 years ago I was shadow rapporteur on the AFIT at that time, the directive, which has been destroyed, unfortunately, by the member states, and in particular by my own member state. I have to say that. All those who are crying now were those who tried to water down it, and now we have the situation.
Which is Germany.
Yes. You destroyed all my strategy now. Balance both. No, the thing is, in a nutshell, we need the industry. We need the technology. We have to spread it out all around the European Union, and we should not go only in one direction. This is what I always try to explain. We need in a kind of technological openness. We need, I think in a light-duty vehicles, more or less, I expect that the battery electric vehicle has the best efficiency and they will win the race. But on the other hand side, we have other use cases. We have the heavy-duty vehicles. We will have, in my opinion, a 70-30 mixture of electric vehicles and also hydrogen technology. Final sentence, we should not make the same mistake what we did with electric vehicles. The chicken and egg problem was always because of this, because the legislators were not strong enough to impose, and the industry were reluctant. And with the hydrogen technology, I think we as legislators, we have to give them a clear pace, and the industry will follow, I surely believe.
Agne, Lithuania is a key player in road transport, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that road transport accounts to around about 5% of the GDP in Lithuania. How do you see the Lithuanian fleets moving on the road in the EU with an asymmetric development of infrastructure, whereby in the Western Europe you would have presumably member states being more ambitious and developing alternative fuel infrastructure, but the other part of Europe not so much up to the speed, so asymmetric rollout.
Okay, so first of all, I want to be more precise on the percentages. 8% of GDP belongs to transport sector, and together with logistics, it's around 13%, which is basically the third biggest industry in Lithuania. So as you can see, there is a reason why I'm here. I'm joking. Well, the road transport is very, very important for Lithuania. We are one of the leaders, that's a fact, in the European Union, and 80% of all the trucks from Lithuania goes to Europe, as you mentioned, and only 20% are going some other places to the third countries. So I would say that the asymmetry is very, very bad for us, and we do understand that our industry, as other industries in this sector, is strong as the infrastructure is equal everywhere. So we totally agree that the goal should be equal for all countries, because we need to create a network. And I think, as I mentioned before, IRU created this conference on the very right time, because tomorrow I'm going to Luxembourg, and I think that a fair directive will have a general view from all the member states. Well, in Lithuanian case, which is obviously is only one small portion of the whole network which is necessary and where the problem exists, Lithuania already implemented its law last year, which is a very ambitious law, and in some parts even more ambitious than the regulation which is coming into place. So with the charging system, we definitely understand, I mean, everybody here agreeing that infrastructure should be built as fast as possible, and that the strategic message to the markets, to the manufacturers should be clear here. And Lithuania is doing that. We dedicated more than 166 million to implement the infrastructure. We do have the plans in place, and we're trying to do so. But obviously, we do understand that this is not enough, and not only infrastructure is enough. The compatibility of the whole infrastructure within Europe should be also taken into account, which is very, very important. And while I was coming here, I was talking with my colleagues who's working a bit in different transport areas, and I was trying to explain that just imagine that so far we did not have a problem with the gas stations. Everywhere the connections are unified, and you can easily do that. But now when we're trying to deploy totally different infrastructure, the challenges are totally different there. So from the government perspective, once again, we are definitely supporting the idea not to create only ambitious goals, but that deployment would be equal everywhere. Because what if in the Netherlands we do have very ambitious goals, but then in Poland and other countries, they are more aware of the challenges and, are not moving as fast as possible. How we can create that network? So I would say that Lithuania tomorrow will support all the ambition from the Commission, which were agreed on the all member states, and I do understand that the process is very difficult because the background is different from all the countries. So I would expect that, well, the last message from my side, that every part needs to play its own role, and the governments as well, with the deployment of infrastructure and dedicating of the finances. But the main problem, as I'm always discussing in different places, I'm saying that at this moment, each government is doing 4 parallel processes at the same time. And I think that this is where the challenge is coming from. This is also planning the whole 10 years, trying to succeed and to implement all the criteria and goals for the Green Deal ambition, at the same time as checking within R&D if the innovation is there, if the deployment is possible now, especially with the hydrogen system, because in Lithuanian case we have in our plans to deploy hydrogen stations. Yeah. But the production is not there yet. Yeah. So this needs to take, to be compatible. Thank you.
Thank you, Agne. And we are moving now to Spain. So from Eastern Europe to Southern Europe, Spain is also a very, very important country because a lot of products come from Spain to the north and everywhere, feeding Europe, if I can say it like that. So a similar question as for Agne, and actually before you start replying to the question, I would just like to remind the audience, also the online audience, but also the audience here in our public here in the room, that you can already ask your questions, those at home via the chat box on the right side of the screen, and those in the room, if you just scan the code on the cards that you received, you can ask your questions there on Slido. So similar question as for Agne, Jaime. How do you see the Spanish fleet going throughout Europe with asymmetric development of alternative fuel infrastructure?
Yes, no, for us it's key to have this infrastructure developed in a homogeneous way, no, because if not, it's going to be really difficult, no, to continue feeding, as you said, no, with all the excellent products that we have in Spain to the rest of the European countries, no. So for us, it's really important. Here in Spain, we are making a really great effort in deploying this infrastructure. We are putting lots of money in the table for the different players in order to deploy this infrastructure, but we need that the rest of the member states, the speed of the deployment it has to be similar, no? Because if not, we're going to have a problem as Europe, no? If we want, and we all of us want a green decarbonized transport, and we still want competitive prices for all the products that we buy, we need to deploy this infrastructure. Without this infrastructure, it's not going to be possible to continue to have this ambition that we all share and we all want to achieve it. But we have to make the investment right now in order to give the confidence to the different transport operators. No, they have to make the investment of their life. No, I talked before with Thomas. No, that most of the truck companies, of the transport operators, normally in Spain, no, they have 1 or 2 trucks. It's a really tough decision for them in order to I buy another internal combustion truck, or I change to, I don't know, a hydrogen truck or a battery electric truck. So we really need to give confidence to these truck companies in order to make the right decision and to achieve the ambitious target that we all share.
if we are listening on the members of the panel, we can wonder how come we got this information that the Council is having this tendency to water down the proposal of the Commission, because we hear only ambition, high level of ambition here. So hopefully there are only rumors, and tomorrow we will see a general approach which is as ambitious as the Parliament's. So now, Thomas, leaving aside a bit the member states and just looking at Shell as a supplier of energy and fuels, what would be your own initiatives? So if member states don't deliver, if they don't invest and don't support, what is your own initiative, and actually what would your conditions be? Because you are a commercial company.
Well, I think first of all it's good to recognize what's on the table proposed by Commission. The 2030 target for hydrogen, we very much support. The role that LNG still plays in that, we very much support. As well, I think the clear aspirations for upgrading the grid capacity, which is badly needed in order to start making the next step. But we don't wait for that. So we at Shell today are building one of the biggest biofuels factories in Rotterdam. We're opening up the biggest bio-LNG plant in Germany next year, which will be a great boost to start decarbonizing our trade today, which is really critical. But we are not stopping there, especially on some of the more complex technologies, and Marx knows very much about that. We have committed to a consortium to develop a hydrogen infrastructure in Northwest Europe. We're working with an OEM in the United States to build an infrastructure for truck charging. So steps we're taking very much along our philosophy that in the sector we need to work together to be successful. Clearly we're a big part of that, we're a big player into that, and we absolutely put our weight in. But like with Iveco around LNG, for example, we're working together to go through that. But it will not be enough. Not enough to the point of doing the quick ramp up, and acceleration is critical, for which policy then comes into play. So back to your question on policy, what's really needed for us. I don't want to make a wish list too long, but a few things we'd like to see is absolutely, as already mentioned, and a very clear and ambitious plan on grid upgrades. Back to the point of Gerrit, the mandates and incentives need to be balanced and coordinated across the whole value chain, because today we see this balance of who really needs to step up and who doesn't need to, and especially given the high fragmentation, as we also talked about, for example, in Spain, that coordination along all the players is critical, because if one party doesn't move, the rest can do a lot, but not everything. And the last thing I would also call for is, already mentioned, is that we need to be really clear on the emission performance standards for trucks. We have seen in the passenger side, at the moment you're really clear about clear emission standards, things will also move, and we hope that also will happen for trucks. And if you bring it all together, we strongly believe that by 2040, every single truck in United Europe will be sold without any emissions.
Okay, before asking my second question to each of you, I would like to turn to some of the questions received from the audience. And first question is, where is all the electricity, from Frank Anderson, where is all the electricity? Can you please also, when you ask the question, may I remind you to mention not only your name, but mention also in the chat the company or association that you are representing. Where is all the electricity going to come from? Yeah. All this electricity that we will need for recharging heavy-duty vehicles. Are we confident that we will be able to cover demand and the grid will be physically capable to cope? So, I don't know, any of the... Perhaps, Ismail, if I remember it correctly, that's a question you asked me some months ago. Yes. About the grid. Do you have the answer from other... I told you that we are not those to provide the answer to that question as transport operators, but did you find out the answer in the meantime?
I think that the reason why I tried to explain that we should go into different kind of technologies in those areas where the grid is poor, or in that areas where electrification is difficult to implement, we need other technologies. And there, in my eyes, hydrogen is totally in a good position. Hydrogen, okay, if we discuss everything from the perspective of efficiency, then we could finalize this event and let's go home, yeah? But it's not, everything is not only on the efficiency side. Efficiency is fine. There, where it's possible, we should go for the best possible outcome. But we have realities in life and also within the European Union, and we have discussed several times about the grid system, the power, and hydrogen has the positive outcome or the positive side that you can stock it, you can change it into different versions. Okay, we lose efficiency, but in the end you can stock it and you can use it later on. And we need, and we will need, and I think this is, I know it's a discussion, but there is no evidence 100% which convinced me that the European Union will be able to deliver his own renewable energy only by itself. I don't believe this. I think we will need energy transportation from other regions of the world. In particular, I think North Africa. We have other regions, even Ukraine. I think most of the people don't know that the Odessa region has the same sun radiation compared to Italy and to Greece, for example. So we need ways in order to get some energy from that side, and for this energy, we need some ways how to stock it. And I think it's a utopia to think that we can build a pipeline through North Africa, below the Mediterranean to the European Union. I think this is too expensive, geopolitical, too difficult, and we need some ways how to bring our neighborhood together. And therefore, it's a valuable question. There where the grid is there, we should do it. And I believe also that in reality, we have to stretch a little bit out the charging points. For the moment, it's based on the motorways, generally speaking, yeah, on the corridors, on the 9 big corridors, on the European TEN-T corridors. And the use cases are different. You have some trucks who are going from point to point, 300 kilometers, for example. They have their own infrastructure. They can charge it overnight. But we have also those countries, as Mrs. Minister already mentioned, in the periphery are mainly delivering goods towards west and north of the European Union. They are driving thousands of kilometers for weeks and months on the roads. And for this, we also need some solution beside the electrification technology. Therefore, this is the idea behind not only to put all the eggs in one basket.
So we need options.
Definitely.
That's always what we say. Thank you very much. I will now move to the second question, and I would like to ask first Agne. We have a trend, let's say, or a big policy in the EU, also originating from the European Commission, but also embraced by many member states, which is called shift to rail, or shift to rail and inland waterways, shift to anything else but road. So the question there is, do you believe that decarbonization of transport in the EU can be successful without decarbonization or profound decarbonization of road transport, and that the shift to whatever other mode can alone solve the problem?
Well, you know, 30% of all the transport CO2 pollution comes in Lithuania from transport, So, and 90% of that CO2 emissions comes from road transport. So what I do believe that intermodality here and rethink of the whole value chain from the business side will be a key here. I do believe that even our, transport, road transport sector and the companies are, willing to become a part of those value chains, together, implementing some parts of the, logistics into using rails. So I do believe that in the future, it's definitely not enough to just decarbonize road transport. That's a clear answer, but I would say that intermodality will play a huge importance in shifting and actually making Green Deal goes. And I think that road transport is kind of trying to rethink their how to find the place into this value chain. So I think that the efforts will be needed from all transport modes, and this is a very clear message, I think, for everyone, and it's not something very unique. We are reliving this huge shift, and I always like to mention 3 weeks ago I had a meeting with a secretary, transport secretary Pete Buttigieg of the United States, and I really enjoyed when he mentioned that now we are living into the verge of this sector, and this is fascinating because there is a lot of things what we are doing, uniquely first time. And I think that we'll need all the efforts from all the stakeholders and all the transport modes in order to make the shift. And it's not only about Green Deal initiatives and goals, but it's also about efficiency, about new economics, value, how you can create, and so on and so on. So I think I will answer to the very first question as well, that I do believe that we need to make this transition faster, just faster, and all the geopolitical situation just makes us, in Lithuania, that's for sure, very much aware that this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the same question for Ismail, actually. And we have 8 minutes to go from this panel, so may I ask you to be very straight to the point. Not that you haven't been until now, but even more.
Which question?
Model shift, is that a solution in itself? Or is the decarbonization of road transport key to transport decarbonization in general?
I think both. I think we need both. Modal shift to the rail. I think it's clear that you see the emissions on rail, you see the emissions on different other modes of transport. I would say both, but just to give you an example, when it comes to aviation, short-haul flights, we can avoid short-haul flights when we have a good connection on the passenger rail. Therefore, I would say both is needed.
And now, Jaime. I would like to ask you a different type of question, looking in the energy mix of the future and also solutions shorter term on a transition period, but also long term. From a Spanish perspective, from your perspective, what is the ideal world? What kind of mix? We heard before the idea of options. Ismail mentioned that options are necessary. We can't bet on only one technology, let's say. So what is your vision on that?
We think that in the short term, in this transition period, we need the best of all the different technologies and all the different fuels, and also the current fleet that we have is full of internal combustion engines, so everything that we can do in order to maximize the decarbonization of the current fleet, I think it's important. I think the final photograph or the final stage, I think it's clear it's going to be electricity for the short distance, and maybe hydrogen for the long distance. But in the short term, we need the best of all the technologies to achieve these ambitious targets that we all share.
And a similar question actually for Thomas. So what is, from Sjel's perspective, what is the ideal energy mix of the transition period and of the far future?
Build upon the picture that we shared from Spain. We shared a picture. Hydrogen electric is the end state. But we also need to recognize that we expect still by 2040 that 25% of the trucks on the road will be internal combustion engine. Trucks don't simply go away, given the complexities and also the low economies of earnings that people have. So it will take a while to get them out. So therefore, we strongly believe that we also need to be very clear on working for today's customers and also tomorrow's for drop-in solutions, where we think biofuels and also the bio-LNG will be a very important play part, back also to the well-to-wheel conversation that helps us to really decarbonize today, tomorrow, but very much also for the coming decades to come.
And Gerrit, now we came unavoidably to combustion engine.
Yeah.
So, and I was mentioning in the beginning that the CO2 standards for HDV are definitely something which is on the EU legislative agenda in the near future. How do you see, as Iveco, how do you see the future of combustion engine, perhaps in combination with carbon neutral fuels, synthetic fuels?
Yeah, they absolutely have to, and they are going to continue. It is a total wrong path to think that everything is going to run electric, so I agree with my other panelists here. Because if we ramp up quickly battery electric, you should know that 6 to 7 chemical and rare earth ingredients out of 10 in a battery come from China. So if you go quickly, you have your next dependency, okay? If you have fuel cell hydrogen, we need to get the hydrogen, we need to get it green in order to, and there's also only so much available. No? And when we look at alternative fuels, biofuels today, and that's why biomethane, bio-CNG, bio-LNG is the way to go, and is the way to go now in order to decarbonize the transport with trucks that have a similar range than diesel trucks. And the reasoning behind this is simply there are applications in commercial vehicles that can't be electrified. You cannot electrify a garbage truck in a way that makes sense, or a construction truck or a tipper truck. They're just segments. It just doesn't make sense. And with that, I believe e-fuels on the other side are also not the answer, because if we are sourcing e-fuels from the same countries where we get fossil fuels from today, you have your future dependency and the old dependency. So we need to have a balance of sources, we need to have a balance of technologies, and we need to keep diversity in technology and thinking, because if we back one horse, it's not going to work.
Our panel members were so efficient that we even have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I would like to give priority now to our participants here in the room. Any question, just raise your hand, and we have microphones circulating in the room, so you can raise your question. Doesn't work?
No?
No?
Now you hear me. Hello, Claude Evans from Truck and Business Magazine. Will the MCS standards be eventually included in the AFIA regulation? Because that would be instrumental to decarbonize faster.
We didn't understand very well. Can you repeat, please?
Will the new mega MCS standard, so the new megawatt charging system that the OEMs have been developing together, will that be included in the AFIA regulation?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's very quick. We can get another question. Yes, the answer is yes. Okay. Another question from the audience in the room? You don't have a lot of time, so no more question? Yeah. Okay, Elmer?
I think I can raise my voice.
Yeah, but for the streaming, it's important to use the microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Elmer de Bruin from TLN, the Dutch Road Haulage Association, and there were a lot of talks about efficiency. And as we know, will be perhaps a scarcity in oil, and there's some low-hanging fruit measures which are very difficult to mention perhaps here. But let's talk about the eco-combi, border crossing possibilities. That's one. I think Daniel mentioned it, but I think his cabinet does not fully agree with that. Yes, okay, but we heard other. And the second question is 40 tons. Why not raise it to 44 tons? You have 10% extra volume, you save a lot of diesel, it's more efficient, and that's a low-hanging fruit measure. So it's a very easy question, so very easy answer also, perhaps.
Well, it's for the politicians, so for the politicians, right? So what about the eco-combi, the big trucks?
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's not promising.
I just said, oh my God. We had the discussion years ago, but I have to say that was really before the diesel scandal, and it was a different world, to be honest. There are also arguments which makes it difficult, but are in the meantime definitely arguments which goes into that direction. And I would all of us invite to step a little bit aside of being ideological. At that time, I have to clearly say that was also ideological, but in the meantime, I think it's a little bit different. One argument at that time was, oh, it's not safe enough. which was definitely proved wrong. They are safe, definitely safe. So this argument is not anymore valuable. And on the other hand side, it has also to do with modal shift and so on. So we will see what the European Commission, if European Commission proposes in the Parliament, we will try to find a way in order to discuss it. But for the moment, it's that what I can tell you, yeah? There is no ideological things anymore, at least not for me anymore.
Circumstances have also changed, right? Also in the sense that now we are really looking at any tools which can contribute to decarbonization, some being low-hanging fruits, some being far-reaching fruits, and so on. So, okay, on this optimistic tone...
in combination with digitalization, I think it would make sense.
And intermodal transport, perhaps? Yeah. On this optimistic tone, regarding the, let's say, all opportunities of the future, including larger vehicles, I would like to thank the panel members for their intervention and contribution, and invite them to take a seat in the audience. And I would like to invite the members of the second panel here on the stage.
Thank you.
So the second panel focuses on incentives for road transport operators. Is the EU ready to incentivize road transport operators to do the shift? But before turning to the panel members, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for this panel, Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador George Friden. He is the ambassador of Luxembourg to the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes speaking in a personal capacity. I do wonder why they why they ask a Luxembourger to speak about taxation. There must be something there. Anyway, the Energy Taxation Directive. Now, clearly, taxation is an important tool, maybe the most powerful one, to incentivize a transition. Of course, it's not necessarily an EU incentivizing here, because after all, the tax revenue we are talking about comes from the member states at the end of the day. So it's member states incentivizing. But anyway, the Energy Taxation Directive, an old friend, which has not aged particularly well. So it was outdated anyway, needed adapting. And the Commission proposal now aims to adapt it to Fit for 55. It's potentially a crucial instrument. Now, of course, it follows a somewhat different procedural path from the rest of the package, in the sense that it is a unanimous decision by the Council to modify that directive. Now, the aim of the Commission proposal, I think, essentially for the purposes of this discussion, I would see 2 points. Alignment of taxation between similar products on the one side, and an increase of excise rates according to the energy content of the products targeted. So there is clearly an element of stick there, it has to be said. Energy has to become taxed more. That will push the transition. That is an important incentive. Of course, and now I get to the carrot element in the Energy Taxation Directive. Of course, you can modulate the rates and have more favorable rates, of course, for alternative fuels. You can have more favorable rates, say, for electricity. All that, of course, bearing in mind, again, the effect on national finances. But basically, I think the proposal is meant to accompany a long-term bet towards electricity, towards potentially hydrogen. And that, of course, brings us back to the panel one question of supply and infrastructure. Now, all that I've just said was, of course, perfectly sensible and rational at the time the proposal was made, and it was all, I think, a addition to, or a crucial element to the Fit for 55 package. Of course, we now have a new situation. It has been mentioned repeatedly. The brutal invasion of Ukraine has changed the energy market, and very clearly, a revised energy taxation directive that has as an ambition to increase the price of energy becomes politically a difficult proposition at a time where the energy market has huge volatility anyway. Inflation, shocks, etc. are extremely striking in the energy market. So this will clearly be a case calling for the legislator to keep in mind the long-term objective, not get sidetracked from the long-term objective. The costs will be borne, I think, at the end of the day by both customers, the industry, but also at the end of the day, national governments. And again, it will be a crucial matter to not lose sight of the long-term objective because of the more hopefully temporary, or at least not as structural, difficulties that are faced right now in the energy pricing sector. I think I will keep it at that, and I hope that I was within my allotted time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Friden. And now, before introducing our panel members representing again the European Parliament, of course, and the industry, as well as the NGOs, or non-profit organization active in the environmental field, I would like to turn again to the audience and launch the third and last polling question. Will a CO2 charge added to the fuel price paid by commercial road transport users speed up decarbonization? And the options are yes, no, or yes, but only if all road users, as opposed to only commercial operators, pay the same charge, and there is sufficient access to alternative fueled vehicles. So we see the conditional yes and the yes being quite tight. Okay, interesting. We can stop now the polling question. I think the outcome is quite clear. You can still display the results, please. The outcome of it. Yeah. So we have 42% yes, without any conditions. 40% yes with conditions, meaning all road users should be included and there should be sufficient alternative fueled vehicles. And also a significant no, 20%. So I would like now to turn to the panel members and start perhaps with Andrey. Andrey Novakov. Andrey is a member of the European Parliament and part of the EPP group in the European Parliament, and also Andrey has a very important capacity in which he's here today, meaning he is the voice on emission trading scheme for transport in the Tran Committee of the European Parliament.
Thanks a lot, I'm thrilled. Thank you very much for having me here, for inviting me. It's a great honor being among so, I would say, relevant and important people who are involved in the transport and the transport transition. Let me start with this, that I have two things that I disagree. First is that I'm not going to allow to support to change the dependence from Russian oil to the dependence of Chinese batteries. That's first thing. And the second, I would not support any treatment of industry as criminals. Because sometimes I think I'm working on my desk are arriving proposals. I'm not saying that they're coming from any institutions, but somehow it enters my desk, so we have to deal with it, to work with them. It's part of the legislation process, and they're greener than Greta Thunberg. And sometimes I'm thinking that they're written by someone with her experience with transport. I really don't get something that, for me, the future is clear, and it's clean. Probably not green, but clean, for sure. I do understand that one era is over and another is coming, but we should do it hand by hand with the industry, not one against each other. Sometimes when we speak with colleagues, between each other, I get the feeling that, they forget that the coal and oil bring us out from the Stone Age. We are the prosperous and rich countries because, or partly because, of those industries. We should not forget that. And I know what the future belongs. Now, my panel, I have one question, I think.
We will go to the question soon, Andrey. Now it's just, are you surprised by this tie there? It's almost a tie. So, no. Okay.
No, the parliament is split. People outside are split as well. So what we have to do as a politician is to become better of explaining complex issues in a simple way that the people could understand. And I believe that if we manage to do so without punishing ordinary people and industry and find a solution that is workable for all sides, then we can reach our goals. And finally, I would say that I believe in the market. So when electrical buses, as those one, are getting better and many things they are than ordinary ones, companies will going to buy them without forcing them from the European Parliament. This is how the evolution goes. And I think this is the way forward. Thank you.
Christoph. Christoph Debus. Christoph is the CFO of Flix, so in a very good position to speak about money and incentives to transport operators. I don't think there is any need to present Flix as a global mobility provider for 100,000 daily connections in the EU and worldwide. So, very quick reaction to the polling question outcome.
So, well, I just learned that there is always a tie. On that one, I don't agree, and I explain you why. We have heard very good arguments today. However, we have forgotten a little bit about the consumer. And I think the consumer will make, at the end of the day, also decisions how to decarbonize travel. And on that one, the best way to help consumers with current technology is really to share mobility, to have collective means of mobility. This is really one area which is for us, but also for many of our competitors. So that's why what I've just read, that we say there is no difference if we just do it, for industry road transport operators, and we leave individual cars out. I think that's the wrong way. If we do it, it should be without any discrimination. It's either all or no one. If not, that would be really a contradiction against Fit for 55, as if we really keep the car, which is the most inefficient in the CO2 footprint, even if it's electrical car. I think on a bus, I think we are 6 times better than on a car and 9 times better than on a flight in terms of CO2 footprint. So that's why I'm strongly in favor that if we do it, that's okay, but then we should do it without any discrimination for all participants in road transport.
From coaches, we move to trucks. So we have Sjel here with us from Van der Eyck, from the Netherlands, Deputy Managing Director, a company having 1,000 trucks, roundabout, and having also other type of operations like warehousing and freight forwarding, and so on. So a big player in the hauliers market. So quick reaction to this outcome, please.
Well, I think that what you usually see if these kind of things happen is that very basically, and I agree with you, we pass it on to our shippers if there's any incentive or any penalty or whatsoever. So it will, I don't think it will have the effect that it's supposed to have. So.
And last but not least, we have Julia. Julia is a Senior Director of Vehicles and E-Mobility at Transport and Environment, TNE. This Transport and Environment is an umbrella for the various organizations acting in transport and the greening of transport in the EU.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot also for having TNE at this event. So of course, it's a difficult question to answer in 30 seconds. I would like to bring maybe 2 perspectives here. The first one is a broader one about carbon pricing or CO2 price as such. And it is really important to underscore that as we are nearing and we have to accelerate decarbonization, every sector of the economy has to play its part, have to be covered by this, including road fuels and including road transport. So there is no question about it. And in fact, if we are also honest, industrial players quite often, hauliers, don't actually pay the same diesel price at the pump as people. People pay more because there are a lot of tax rebates, exemptions, and so forth. So it does make sense to add and overarchingly have a carbon price. Of course, it can't just come on its own. It has to come also with support, incentives for the sector to actually have alternatives. And here, scaling up not just the infrastructure, but the supply of clean truck models is really important. And maybe we don't have time to talk too much about how technologies come to being, but I would argue that it is actually the role of regulators and governments to scale up new technologies. Nothing that we take for granted today came out of the market. Internet happened by the US government pushing this. Government innovation is at the heart of starting something. Then you scale it up, and then, of course, it becomes the market. So I do believe that there's a huge role for governments. Now, speaking of for ETS2 and exactly what's happening today in the Parliament, look, it's hard politically. It was the compromise that is now today on the table that was possible, which had the majority. But I do believe that it actually does make sense to have businesses decarbonize faster than everyday people. However, 2029 to add everyone is too late, and it really does, it does really reduce the impact of this scheme, so it is too late. When it comes to our view as an NGO or for ETS2, the most important are two things. First of all, it's important that the Social Climate Fund is an effective mechanism, that when we do apply carbon price, those less well off in the society are supported to make the transition. And secondly, it's also important to make the big oil pay part of the price. It's not appropriate that they just pass it on to everyone and don't do anything themselves. At least half of the carbon costs must be absorbed by oil companies to actually make the transformation. So with those two conditions, full ETS2 on all sectors for us should be acceptable.
Andrey, you'll have now the opportunity to reply to Julia as well, because it's partially covered by the question I have for you. And we look at the discussions in the European Parliament with an opinion of the Transport Committee of the European Parliament, which you led on, contradicting the opinion of the Environmental Committee of the European Parliament, which is the dominant committee on this file. So how do you see this discussion in the Parliament progressing, and further on the road, let's say, the discussions with the Council in the negotiation phase?
The thing is, we in Transport Committee, most of the people who consist in that committee were very practical-oriented people. Most of us have driving license, so we drive a lot. So we speak with people who have something to do with transport, and we try to keep it, down to earth, down to ground. And I would like to zoom out a bit. You know that EV stands for electrical vehicles. So sometimes I'll call them EEV, emissions elsewhere vehicles. Because if we don't produce clean electricity, we are charging cars, but the CO2 emissions are going from the chimney of the coal power plant 100 kilometers away. So if we find a sustainable solution in which we are not just aiming at highly ambitious goals for one reason or another, it's meaningless. I don't see why we should do it. I have some concerns talking about practice, some concerns about the recent proposal coming as a compromise in the Parliament that we should split commercial and private vehicles. So first, commercial vehicles are 30 million across EU. Private are 300 million. I'm not sure that on practice it could work, so I'm glad that we have people here from Sjel that could say that on a same pump we can divide private and commercials. Moreover, there are commercial vehicles used for private purposes. It happens in many companies. So I have just questions to ask, because I would like to see this implemented. And, I hate to be right, because I remember how much we fought with Ismail, very honorable colleagues of mine. We fight a lot in the parliament, we're good friends, although about mobility package. And now we can see it's not working on practice because you could not make empty trucks crossing Europe for no reason, without cargo. The market doesn't work that way.
Andrey, if we continue on this topic, then we will hijack the whole conference, and I'm sure everybody in the room will only talk, apart from the taxi, perhaps.
Okay, then lock the door, please.
I was looking happy already at Raluca, but never mind.
Sjel also had a bit of a tendency in that direction, and I said that the topic, let's focus on,
The thing is, the prices are skyrocketing at the moment. COVID is hitting transport very severely, and transport was one of the sectors that recovered our economy and was hit mostly along with tourism. War is going on. There is shortage of supplies. We don't need another tax at the moment to punish the business in the industry. We have to find a way to do it smoothly. And we can reach 55% even without ETS. It's not only two. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrey. Christoph, a question for you. What are the main challenges for you as a coach, representing the coach business, let's say, for decarbonization?
So, as an operator, and as you said, as a global coach and mobility provider, we run also trains, but primarily also buses and coaches. So first of all, I think we underestimate the effect which we are having on the industry. Today, on a coach, with our load factors and our system, I think the CO2 footprint is 23 grams per 100 passenger kilometers. This is outstanding. It's 6 times better than a passenger car. It's 9 times better than a plane. So I think we provide customers already the choice at a very affordable cost. And I think we should not underestimate the effect which the consumer will have. What are the other elements? And we had a very good discussion. And from my perspective, it's basically 4 points. The first point, from an operator perspective, is what the colleagues on the first panel have mentioned, is really investing in the right technology and knowing which technology it will be, but also specific technology, because maybe electricity is more better for passenger cars, whereas biogas or hydrogen might be better for commercial vehicles. Second, it's not only about the vehicles, it's about the infrastructure. Without an infrastructure, what the colleague said before. Thirdly, and that's again from an operator perspective, if we were doing all of that, we would still not have a perfect system, as in road transport, we don't have a single European market. Having worked 10 years as a CEO of a large European airline, I'm really surprised in that industry to say there is a single European sky, there is no single European road. This is inefficiency. It would be very easy to fix if we mean it serious. If we talk about Fit for 55, we should also address this point. And again, fourth point, let's not underestimate the effect on the consumer. They have to buy in. So let's support collective means of transport, as this is the best way to reduce the CO2 footprint and to get to carbon neutrality.
Thank you, Christoph. And Sjel, from a whole year's perspective, so what are the main challenges for decarbonization at the moment?
Yeah. Well, main challenge is always to make a little bit of money. We've heard a lot about high ambitions and things like that, and with all due respect, but we are a private-owned company, and that means that our shareholders in the end would like to see a bit of return on their investment. It's as simple as that. One of the challenges is the whole phasing out. So the transition periods, foreseeabilities, when will trucks be available, etc. Average life cycle of a truck, an international truck, is approximately 7 years. So we need to know far in advance where and when things become compulsory, and so that we can act on that. Now we all know that zero-emission trucks are a little bit more expensive than the average diesel truck we operate at the moment. Which will mean increasing cost. So we ask ourselves every now and then, should we be a first mover? It will certainly increase cost. It will make the rates for our customers higher. And will the customer, the shipper, in the end accept those higher rates? And how can we convince them to come along with us? I heard a lot about stepping up to the plate, act together. etc. To be honest, I'm a little bit not so enthusiastic about that, because we have been offering HVO prices for the last 2 years, and well, let's just say that the enthusiasm with our customers is not exactly great. So that's about economics. Then, from a technical point of view, we operate a lot of trucks. Trucks are the availability. I've heard that there are trucks coming along. The manufacturers are stepping up, but I wonder if you look at the number of trucks that are in Europe in general, if they can, can get along with that. Then the range of trucks is quite limited, especially in the long haul, which we do quite a lot. There are some that claim 400 kilometers at the moment, and I talked to a respected manufacturer last night, and he said that they're going to make it 2 times 500 kilometers, but that will only be within 2 to 3 years. So then we cannot look at electric trucks, so we have to look for maybe hydrogen. Well, that's not very mature yet and still requires a lot of technical development. And last but not least, we've heard this quite a lot this afternoon, is the range of network charging points. I mean, what kind of fuel you put in, if it's electricity or hydrogen or whatsoever, we do need that to run our trucks. I mean, it's as simple as that. Last thing is on operations. Reliability of the trucks will have to be proven in real-life circumstances. We've had some experience with new engines going from Euro 3 to Euro 4, for instance. Has all been proven in a laboratory environment, but if it comes to real life, then sometimes things do pop up. Our planning will become more complex because of the ranges. If it's only 400 kilometers, then our operational planning will become more complex. And like I said, we operate a large fleet, so we need unlimited possibilities of recharging. And last but not least, I talked about the reliability. What about maintenance in future? We have now a very smooth running fleet where we know everything about diesel engines, and we will need to step up and get experience on maintenance and schedules, etc., for electric truckers as well.
Sjel, just perhaps because it's a follow-up to what you just said. And we have outside now, when you came in, there was an electric bus. When you go out now, there will be an electric truck. It's a 30-ton electric truck, not the 40-ton, which is for long distance. Do you see different uses for trucks of different technologies? So 20-ton, 30-ton, for some, yeah.
It depends on your operations, and it depends on what kind of range you need. If you talk about city distribution, obviously your range is different than when you talk about long haul. So the general idea at the moment is that for, let's say, domestic transportation, the electric vehicles will be sufficient. But for long haul operations, we definitely need to look to hydrogen trucks. I don't know if Iveco agrees with that, but that's the general idea that we get.
And now, Julia. A question which I also had to some of the members of the first panel, looking at the modal shift. From an NGO perspective, let's say advocating for environment and decarbonization, is the shift to other modes sufficient to achieve decarbonization, or it is absolutely necessary and we can't do it without decarbonization of road transport?
So I would agree with what Mr. Ertug said. Both are needed. Of course, within the overall efficiency of the system, there is a lot we can shift and do operations by rail, but we need investments there. We need to remove barriers. We also, let's be honest, need to clean up loads of those diesel locomotives around Europe as well. They also should be zero and low emission. But with the pricing, economics, flexibility, road freight is here to stay. And we need to have solutions to decarbonize, to drive that sector to zero emissions. It is not about punishing an industry. And actually, within the overarching package of all the measures under the Green Deal, for us, it's not the carbon pricing for this that will do the trick. It's actually the measure that Daniel Mess mentioned earlier, which is coming at the end of this year, the truck CO2 standards, that will and must scale up and improve and make it there faster and more supply of zero-emission trucks. On a life cycle analysis, actually today, a battery electric truck is already 50% better than a diesel truck, because electricity is really decarbonizing. There's actually not so many coal pipes, thank God, out there today in Europe. We are decarbonizing it pretty fast. When it comes to truck CO2 review, it's really important to, it's difficult to overstate what transformation in the industry it can bring. Just have a look what's happening with electric car industry at the moment. This is the result of European car CO2 standards. So we need to achieve the same with trucks. What we need there is, similarly as for cars, a signal for the entire value chain to go zero emission. And most trucks can be zero emission, new trucks by 2035. And when we say zero emission, primarily battery electric, but also hydrogen, so it's a mix of a number of solutions. But we also need to have milestones before that 100% to accelerate the supply and have the transformation happen, so higher targets in 2030, in 2027, for example. So this is something that will really make the difference and will make sure that actually the industry has the supply on the market, for which then you add on top the carbon price, and together it works as a mechanism, having alternatives and having the signal.
Thank you, Julia. And before asking the second panel, the second question I have for the panel members, I would like to turn to the audience and read one of the questions which were raised, which was raised by our audience. And actually, it came back through different ways. It's a kind of a theme which comes back again and again. And that's the fact that at the moment we are talking about cleaner, very clean, let's say, fleets with hydrogen electric vehicles, but the reality on the ground is that we still have a lot of vehicles running on Euro 3, Euro 4, Euro 2, even, across Europe. So how shall we do? What shall we do about that? So is really greening of transport only mean, does greening of transport only mean going to hydrogen, electric, or what can we do short term also to clean these big fleets on the EU roads which don't run on Euro 6, which is the latest standard? I don't know who would like to, perhaps Andrey.
Probably somebody from the industry, I don't know.
Sjel.
Well, I heard somebody talking about low-hanging fruits. One of the things that we do is simply adjust the drivers in the way they drive and make sure that they use the cruise control, etc., and that cuts both ways because it's less cost on fuel and it means less CO2. So that's a very low-hanging fruit, and that's what we have been doing within Jan Rijk for the last 3-4 years anyway. I know Sjel is not a favor of that, but because it means less liters, but that's the way. That's one of the low-hanging fruits that we're applying at the moment as well.
Christoph, back to you now. One question: if you were to opt now for a new, and assuming all the new vehicles would be available, so you have zero-emission tailpipe coaches, and everything was there in place from a technology perspective, what would your criteria for investment be?
So first of all, you have to understand the DNA of our company. Our company colors are green, and we really mean it. The average age of our employees is 30. It's a different generation. They are convinced we want to paint the world green, really providing new mode of transport and doing it in the most efficient way. So that's why we have been and are pioneering on intercity buses. Since 2018, we had first trials with electric buses, that whenever you decide what are the key criteria, is what do you provide at the end of the day in terms of comfort to the consumer. And then it's about range, we heard that before, and it's about the charging duration, because if you have to charge for 1 or 2 hours, I think the productivity of your whole system goes down and you can't provide affordable mobility anymore. So we don't see for buses that electricity, at least at the moment, is the solution. We have a very good use case for biogas buses, actually with one of the OEMs who is here in the room. You can see it every day, twice here in Brussels, as we serve our line between Brussels and Amsterdam.
You mean coaches?
On coaches, yeah.
Yeah, because buses, it's the city
yeah, so
buses.
intercity buses, if I talk about, so I mean intercity coaches. So that's something which works very well. We have the same already in Sweden, and we are planning to launch hydrogen propulsed buses in 2024, where we work together on a process. So I think what is really missing is that the technology is maybe not yet available in the reliability and at scale to do so, but we are absolutely committed to do so. What it takes, and we have heard that partly before on the panel here, and what we would love to have as support from the political side is first a clear steer. We need robust plan, as it's huge investments for our partners, for ourselves to decide on a technology. Then we need somehow a clear planning horizon. The second element is we need really a harmonized system across Europe. So we don't need regional approaches where charging stations and whatever have different approaches. So those are really the key criteria. And as I said, we need the whole framework, especially for us as operator. It's not only about the infrastructure and the technology framework. We need also the single European road market.
Same question for Sjel. So,
well, I
assuming you had 40 tons,
we're well aligned.
Yeah.
40 tons hydrogen trucks available, 40 tons electric battery trucks available, everything available for all ranges. What were your criteria for investment be?
I guess it would be as it is for every truck. I mean, it's TCO, the ownership, technical possibilities, and compliance with rules and regulations. And obviously, where are you going to use that truck in which kind of circumstances? You asked about the sport, and I think that what we really need is stability and alignment in legislation. Please make clear what we can and what we cannot do. And also, we see all kind of sort of tax and these kind of things coming in. I would really like to ask for prevent double or even triple taxation on CO2 emissions. And maybe I'm a bit worried. Maybe in the Netherlands we've seen a few things with taxes that we didn't get back. So let's be careful with that, and please align these measures that we see. And like I said before, level playing field. That's very important. Not regional solutions, and that's what we see happening. We have offices all over Europe, and we see very, let's say, local and regional solutions to the same, let's say, question or the same rules that have been issued.
Julia, in your view, or TNE view, what are the fast ways on this transition period until those trucks we were talking about and the coaches we were talking about are really developed and on the market? What are the easy solutions for decarbonization?
Yes, absolutely. So actually the good news is that beyond the more structural way to get our trucks oil-free, there are some short-term measures we can take now that can have immediate effect. And it's really important to actually do them and do them quickly, because we do have to reduce our oil reliance on Russia. And most of our oil reliance on Russia is actually diesel as the commercial fuel. So short-term measures that we would really want to see a lot more within the trucking industry are, first of all, speed limits, a very effective measure. Across Europe today already trucks can't drive more than 90 kilometers per hour. And in fact, International Energy Agency identifies this as the top low-hanging fruit measure to reduce fuel very quickly. If we require, via reviewing that European regulation on speed limitation devices, for trucks all across the board to drive just at 80 kilometers per hour, we will save 5% of all the diesel used in the trucking industry. That's a big short-term saving. The second thing to mention would be a bigger modernization program around aerodynamic devices. That was already actually mentioned also by Daniel earlier. There are a number of things we can do which are actually quite easy and have a payback time of less than 1 year. Things like side skirts, so you can have them on the rear, on the sides, at the cab roofs and stuff. And each of them can give you up to 5% diesel savings as well. Some countries already have incentive programs to actually finance them, help the truckers. We actually should put it as a regulation within the upcoming green freight package to oblige all the trucks in the future to have them by 2025. And last but not least, we can also do a lot around tires, for example. So if we today swap an average tire with medium efficiency to a class A tire on a truck, again we save up to 5% diesel savings. And it's not just helping us save fuel, it's also a great measure actually to support the European industry, because a lot of better quality tires are actually produced in Europe. So a number of short-term measures there. We have a report coming up on that actually shortly, where we can today already, on today's technology, make our trucks independent from the real problem, which is oil dependency.
What about, since they will still run on diesel for a big while from now, what about low carbon fuels?
Well, we don't really see massive amounts of low carbon fuels available, actually. A lot of people today talk about synthetic fuels. I'll tell you an anecdote. We actually tested synthetic petrol last year. We were the second largest producer of synthetic fuels in Europe, because we actually had to produce 100 liters of that fuel. The sustainable ones, the advanced biofuels, they're not a low-hanging fruit. The volumes are simply not there to do it at the scale that we need. And the volumes for synthetic fuels will be there even later than maturing battery electric technology. And when they are there are other sectors without solutions, like aviation, like the heavy industry, that simply needs them more. It's not about picking one technology. It is about technology openness, but we have an entire economy to decarbonize. So within that, we should pick and choose which are the most optimal solutions for the different sectors. And for the vast amount of trucks, regional, urban, and some long-haul trucks, it is simply electricity, which is the best way. And before we get there, we need to scale it up with truck CO2. Before we get there, there's a lot we can do on the efficiency of the truck and an engine itself.
Andrey, back to you now. And perhaps you can also reflect a bit on what Julia just said, but also last question to you is from a government EU support perspective, what do you see as being the right mixture of incentives for the industry to shift to zero-emission vehicles, also given the fact that we know member states don't have unlimited resources to provide state aid or similar types of measures?
There is, as has been said already, plenty of measures that are encouraging families, households and businesses to purchase electric vehicles. There are subsidies coming from the state. There is infrastructure built by the state or supported by municipalities to charging stations, so on and so forth. But there's still something which bothers me, because I don't remember the last time when a state funded a building of a petrol station, for instance. I mean, they exist because they are a non-profit. And I think this is something which should lead our society forward. It's happened in the history, it should be now. And I think that we should do everything to invest in technology which is going to provide us solutions, rather than just simply forcing solutions to industry which are not be able to follow at the moment. And I agree, there is some very simple, or at least it looks at the first sight, simple solutions which are be able to save fuel, and with this our dependence on importing fuel, not just from Russia but other places. Speed limit on one side, although I wouldn't go too far with this, because I always ask one question: who is going to pay for this? Because if we, for instance, reduce a lot the speed of trucks, saving fuel and emissions, it means that they could make less whole legs. They will deliver later. They can, for 1 working hour, the capacity to deliver efficiency and goods will be lower. It means that the final consumer has to pay more. And I try to avoid this, because I know how many, I'm not talking about just Bulgaria and Romania, but a lot of consumers in France are from rural areas, and the only way to be to use mobility, it's to have a private car. So I think the member states are doing a lot, but the key that should be used mostly is to invest in technology which is going to allow us to get cleaner. For instance, hydrogen. This is one of the key resources for me, because it saves a lot of issues that we have with batteries. Weight, capacity, and at some points hydrogen could be considered as a battery. So during the night, because it's a very energy consuming process, during the night when the nuclear power plants have surplus of energy that could be used for generating hydrogen, and on the very next day you can use it as a source.
Thank you, Andrey, and I would like now to give the chance to the people here in the room to ask questions to the panel members. Dirk.
Thank you, Dirk Seile from the German road haulage industry. Mr. Marx mentioned earlier in the debate that he might be the most prominent victim if the green transition doesn't work. And he is probably right, but I also believe that the road haulage and the bus and coach industry might also be a very prominent victim of it, because we are facing tremendous cost increases, many times induced by European legislation. Eurovignette, ETS 2 was mentioned, European taxation might be mentioned, city restrictions might be mentioned that will make our daily work very difficult or even impossible if the green transition doesn't work, if we don't have the alternatives in which we can invest. So my question to the panelists would be, do you have a time schedule in your mind when you can invest into alternatives? Or are you working week by week, month by month, year by year? When will be the take-up of alternatives that you will invest in the coming years, so we can circumvent all these cost-induced changes of legislation?
Well, I just asked for foreseeability, and that is the main thing. We follow, or we try to follow all the developments, either political, technical, etc. And actually, it's within our boardroom basically every week. Are there any changes? Also, the availability of trucks themselves. If you now try to order trucks, you have to wait for at least 6 to 12 months to get new ones. So we follow it very closely, but we don't have, let's say, sort of end vision or end state that we are anticipating at the moment. Because the end solution or the end answer is simply not there, in my opinion.
So the average age of buses of our partners is 3 to 4 years. So actually, or coaches. Yeah. And therefore, we would be able to switch quite quickly onto new technology. And as I said before, when technology becomes available, we try to pioneer this new technology, and we have some use cases. But it's, as you said, we have to follow a little bit what becomes available, and when the technology becomes available and the infrastructure becomes available.
Any other question from the room or statement? Yes, please.
Frank Andresen, Covestro AG, global polymer producer and therefore also a major shipper. Question to Mr. Wijngaards. Where do you draw the line between battery electric vehicles or trucks and fuel cell electric trucks from a practical perspective? And can you then also answer my question on how do you see the ramp up? By when will each of those trucks be commercially and operationally feasible without funding, without subsidies? Thank you.
Well, we don't have much experience with electric trucks yet. Like I said, we have to depend on the manufacturers, what they say at the moment. So 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, maybe 2 times 500 kilometers. But we have no practical experience yet, so we have to wait and see. I didn't understand I didn't quite hear the last part of your question. When
scale, how long will it take to scale up to be commercially feasible without subsidies? And how long will it take basically for the diesel truck to disappear? 2040, 2035, what do you think? Are we a long way away, or what's your vision?
Yeah, I think that we will need diesel trucks for quite some time, depending obviously on how quickly hydrogen will be developed and will be commercially viable. And as I've said, it will. We have offered to our customers for more than 2 years now an HVO solution. So we have two prices: one CO2 clear and one with, let's say, standard diesel. And it might be down to us, but so far we haven't got any orders on the more expensive one, which I can understand from a shipper's point of view, looking for the lower cost, etc. But
Julia, I think
maybe just to add very briefly. So, of course, we don't have a truck maker today on the panel, but as TNE, we do monitor and analyze quite in depth the truck maker plans that we see. What we see, first of all, kind of on the timelines, is that next year, around 60 models of battery electric trucks are coming to market. And in 2024, every large truck maker, apart from one, are actually bringing long-haul models. If we look at their volumes and plans, around half of all truck sales can be zero emission by 2030, and roughly 90% on today's plans are battery electric. Now, to answer the question how fast it will actually scale up, I think that's where policy comes in. I don't think it's something we can predict, and that's why it's so important to have the clear signal from the regulators how fast we need the industry to scale up, while giving them, of course, the lead time, and what do we need for the climate, from the wider transformation of our society. We do need most trucks to be zero emission by 2035, and if we set this into the legislation now, there's plenty of time for the value chain to adjust. So scale up today depends on the regulations and the regulators that are working on this right now.
Andrey, I think you would also like to react.
Yes, I visited recently one truck producing plant here in Belgium, and then I get the chance to look deeper in the details about electric trucks. So just 0.4% of all trucks who are on the road now are electric, and their price is 5 times more than the ordinary ones. I'm not the one who is going to tell the industry to buy 5 times more expensive trucks, and I think, again, that as soon as the technology is so available and at the reasonable price is something that I'm sure that most of the operators will try to do so. And to sum up, I think it was Reagan who said once that the 10 most dangerous words in English are, "Hi, I am from the government and I'm here to help." So we have to be careful with the industry. Thank you.
I think, Andrey, it also goes a bit to what Sjel was saying, that it's not only the operators, because the chain doesn't stop with the operators, it's also the shippers, and in the end is the final customer. Yeah. So it's basically an entire chain and society which has to be convinced somehow to embrace these new costs, let's say. Another question, Patrick, and then there. Okay.
This is good.
Here it was the first. I saw it, and then Vitautas, and then at the back.
Hello, thank you. I'm Patrick from the FBA, the Belgian Federation, but I would like to clarify something on bus and coach, and of course not to correct Christoph, because he's right when he's talking about his business model and the life cycle of 4 to 5 years, because they have lots of mileage to do. But in general, and the high volume of buses and coaches, the economical life cycle and even contractual life cycle is 10 to 12 years, even in public services. So that is a huge difference. Thank you.
You can just go there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Vitautas.
A bit louder, Vitautas.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So world needs more energy. At the same time, world needs less CO2 emissions. And to your mind, so is it a clever business model to bring back backwards from Western Europe to Eastern Europe trucks? And is it social dumping from Eastern countries or protectionism from Western countries? Thank you.
Vytautas is from the Lithuanian Hauliers Association.
To whom was that question?
To any of you who may like to reply.
Well, it's a painful memory for me talking about mobility package, so probably somebody else should. I have trauma.
But look, we have 4 minutes to go, so if we start talking now about the mobility package, then we can finish tomorrow morning.
I'm not saying anything, Raluca. Don't worry.
Okay, so it's a separate topic. We can discuss it over the cocktail because it already smells like food, you know. So it's a bit difficult to start now. So in some minutes from now on, if you have the patience. So we have another question over there.
Yes, Wijngaards. Hi, former colleague of the fantastic IRU. Today I'm working and representing a Swedish company, Andrey, which you maybe have heard about. We probably operate the largest fleet of electric trucks today in Europe, probably. But we are still waiting also for some delivery of 440 electric trucks. And just a couple of weeks ago, we ordered 110 electric Scanias. So there's a lot of discussion about theoretical possibilities. We are doing it in our daily practice. We also talk a lot about subsidies of zero-emission vehicles. I think we should focus more of the discussions about existing subsidies to fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel vehicles. Because if you remove the fossil fuel subsidies today, the business case for zero-emission vehicles is going to improve drastically, so to say. So the question is, how much do we need to focus on zero-emission subsidies versus removing subsidies from the fossil fuel operations that we have today? Thank you. And that's the question to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah,
we have maximum 1 minute for all of you to reply in an aggregate. So 20 seconds per person.
No. I couldn't agree more. So if we really mean it with Fit for 55, this is one of the low-hanging fruits, no doubt.
Well, I also agree, and I think it brings us in a circle to the beginning of this conversation. That's where, of course, tools such as carbon pricing, such as Eurovignette, come in to exactly do this balance and balance against the fossil fuel subsidies today.
Well, look for balance, look for reality, and that's the thing I would like to say.
My answer would be that you are invited in the European Parliament. In my office, I would like to discuss how to further proceed with your idea. This is how I agree with you.
I would like to thank very much to our panel members for their contribution to today's debate. And as we are approaching the end, I would like to invite the Secretary General of IRU, Alberto to give us the concluding remarks.
I have the very dubious honor of having the challenge of being the only thing that's blocking you to have a drink in your hands, and at the same time, in 3 minutes, try to wrap up everything we've heard. Impossible. So rather than trying to wrap it up, let me just give some very brief comments, and they'll be very brief, so put on your seatbelts because this is going to be fast, very fast. Firstly, the first answer to the first question about the Ukrainian war, where are we going on this, and we were kind of shocked, we were discussing this before, how it'll go, 47, 46%. I think the answer here is it's all in our hands. How we take this forward. Do we make this a challenge or an opportunity? It depends how we go forward dealing with this issue, in particular on decarbonization. Will we do it or not? It's in our hands, and it's a matter of working together and getting it done. The fact that in the EU, 95% of vehicles, commercial vehicles today, work on diesel, and I was having the discussion with Raluca saying, if we use diesel, if we use trucks, if we use buses and coaches, it's because our clients are asking us to get something, whether it's a good or a person, from here to there in the most efficient way we can. And what I was saying to Raluca, if tomorrow they would say, here's a wonderful drone that will get something from here to there as cost effectively and even more quickly than what we can do today, guess what? That's what we will use. So don't think that the industry is in love with the vehicles or the fuel that we use. We use what is efficient, what gets our job done, and allows us to still make a profit. Keep that in mind. Pretty important. Listening to the debate today, I thought back 25 years ago when I authored this funny thing at the IRU called the IRU 3AI strategy for achieving sustainable development, based on incentives, which I heard a lot about today, based on innovation, which there's a whole ocean of information out there, but all of that is predicated on infrastructure. And as we saw on the question, 92% of people say, hey, if you don't have the right infrastructure, who cares about the incentives, who cares about the innovation, you won't get the job done. So that's a call to the governments to make sure that they do their part, and we heard that very, very loud call saying everybody's got to do their part. But also, interestingly, 25 years ago, the IRU called for, you can call it a pragmatic solution, you could call it a low-hanging fruit, I call it a no-brainer solution, and that is the eco-combis. 25 years ago, we could have started reducing our CO2 emissions by up to 30%. Instead, what we hear is that there was ideology that was blocking this low-hanging fruit, this very pragmatic solution. If ideology is going to get in the way of no-brainer solutions, then zero emissions will be, and decarbonization will be an ideology. It won't be a reality. If we have something that works, do it. I heard today also that, speaking ideologically, that we should try to shift people from air to trains. It's funny, I always thought that buses and coaches were the most CO2-friendly way to move people, so why do we have to put them on trains? Just making a comment as to what I heard today. The good news is that the IRU membership has committed by 2050 to have zero emissions. And we will do everything that is pragmatically, realistically possible to achieve that. But again, I repeat, our members are out there to make money. It's a business. That's when you're in business, it's to make a profit, and we can have confirmation that the profit margins are extremely small, 2 to 3%. So the more you throw at us in terms of obstacles, the more we will not be able to do our job and drive the economy. It will require, to achieve what we have said, all stakeholders, everybody in the complete chain, from the person asking the goods to be moved to the person actually receiving the goods, to be part of this solution. One last comment, and then I will let you get onto your drinks, and I'll give the floor back to Raluca. The IRU is a global organization. As you hear from my accent, I'm not from this part of the world. My name suggests that I am. My passport says I'm Italian, but you hear I'm not from here. I'm North American by birth. And my job forces me to think globally because we are a global organization. Let me say this. The EU is not an island. And I'll pause there. It is not an island. So anything you do, you have to think that you're competing in this funny thing called a global economy. And to remain competitive, you have to understand that global economy. Going back to what is sustainable development, economic development, social equity, environmental protection. If you forget the first part, economic development, you're just going to shoot yourselves in the foot. We can achieve the targets that we've mentioned today. We can do it. But let's not put in place policies that will make economic development something that will be our biggest challenge, where we end up having huge unemployment lines instead of actually having decarbonization. We can get it done, but it requires all of us to work together. Thanks for coming. Great debate, and we're looking forward to the third edition and to see how far we've progressed since today. Thanks for your attention.
So now just some very pragmatic information, pieces of information. Also for those in front of the computers, please do not forget to fill in the survey. You also had it on the screen, on the right side of the screen. Those in the room as well, if you use the same code bar and the Slido, you can easily fill in the survey. Also, outside, we have an electric truck talking about the new technologies, which was provided by Scania, IRU's member Scania. So please have a look, check the electric truck outside, and many thanks to Scania for making this available for this conference. I would also like to thank to everybody who made this conference possible, to my colleagues in Brussels, to my colleagues in Geneva, the events team, the communications team. So it was really a huge offer. Also to the technical team, also today present here on the site. And of course, to our panel members from the first panel, the second panel, the keynote speakers, and last but not least, to all of you who took your time to be together with us today. Now, thank you very much. Those in front of the computers, you can disconnect. Those present with us, now the most pleasant part of this afternoon and evening starts. You are invited for a cocktail. It will take place downstairs, but also there are some tables outside where you can see this beautiful truck. Thank you.